think about home for a moment, where you came from. What reminds you of that place? Maybe it's a sound, music spilling through a doorway. Maybe it's a sight, a familiar street, a festival in full swing. Maybe it's a smell, food cooking in the kitchen, rich with memories. When I think of home, I smell the food. In Puerto Rico, that would be the slow simmer of sofrito, the sweetness of fresh mango, or the sizzle of frying sorullitos. When I came to Louisiana, I found different dishes, but the same feeling. The joy of gathering around food, the warmth of people who welcome you to the table, and a deep pride in celebrating culture and tradition. Both places are alive with festivals, music, food, and joy. And both live the same reality, that the water bringing us life can also take it away. Hurricane Katrina in 2005, Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico in 2017 are two of the costliest natural disasters in US history. In Puerto Rico, choosing to retreat from this type of water hazard means only one thing: leaving the island, and with it, your home. But for coastal Louisianans that choose to retreat from water hazards, there could be a different path. So, let's imagine how the inland communities of Louisiana could become the architects of Louisiana's climate transition story. With functional urban centers that attract investment, neighborhoods that are walkable, lively, and safe. Natural areas that are protected for fishing, birding, hunting, and boating. Development restrictions that keep homes and businesses out of harm's way. You see, when we think about Louisiana's disappearing land, most people would picture the coast, barrier islands sinking into the ocean, marshes eroding away. And that story matters, but it's not the whole story. We are also losing land inland, and the losses here are quieter, but also important. In the time since Hurricane Katrina, the Baton Rouge metro area has lost over 100 square miles of natural land, which are the red areas that you see here. These were once pastures and woody wetlands that were acting as a sponge, retaining excess runoff and protecting us from floods. They have been replaced with asphalt and concrete that have the opposite effect and increase flood risk. The scattered development pattern you see here is characteristic of urban sprawl and is driven by two forces that have shaped development across the nation for the past century: economic segregation and car dependence. As a result, here in Louisiana, this has pushed people outwards into areas that we know are risky. For example, the devastating 2016 floods in Louisiana. Research from my lab showed that a lot of the people, the majority of the people that were impacted in the suburban, newly developed parishes were located inside of FEMA's flood hazard area. The damage cost millions, and it also cost lives. At the very same time, thousands of vacant and abandoned buildings are sitting high and dry in the city center in areas that are safe from flooding. So instead of investing and incentivizing bringing life back to our existing infrastructure, we have continued expanding outwards away from each other into areas that we know are risky. In doing so, we're sacrificing twice. We're giving up the natural assets that give Louisiana the name of the sportsman's paradise, while at the same time neglecting the historic heart of our city. We can fix this. There's still a lot of vegetation in our watershed. There are still a lot of vacant and available buildings that we could revitalize. We have the knowledge, we have the tools, we have the local talent. So what could stand in our way? Well, one barrier that I see is the American dilemma. There's a tension that exists between me and we. On the me side, private property rights, that power to buy, transform, and do with your land as you see fit. It's a value that many of us hold dear. But on the we side, those rights don't exist in isolation. We live in shared systems. Roads, utilities, drainages, those only work if we think beyond our individual lot lines. So the question is, where does the me end and the we begin? What happens when your business, something you've put your heart into, loses value because the neighborhood around it has been disinvested in for decades? What happens when a flood caused by unplanned urban development blocks the street you take to work, destroys your car, or takes a life? Our prosperity depends on a city that works for the collective. And we could do that with the right tools. So my colleagues and I, in collaboration with local stakeholders, have been working on a decision support framework that stems from the question, if we could see each piece of land in our region through the lens of flood risk, connectivity, and ecological value, would we plan our cities differently? To do that, we pulled together all the existing data and science we can find into one composite index. And we classified the properties in the Baton Rouge metro area with this index. So we focused on the Amite River Basin. That's the watershed that connects us here in the Baton Rouge metro area. And for context, this is the Amite River Basin relative to the rest of the US. And we focused on the Louisiana portion of the Amite. The Amite extends all the way to Mississippi. It covers areas in Zachary and Baker, and it ends in the lowest lying areas of Livingston and Ascension Parish. The areas that are brightest in color are areas that are prime for investment because they are safe, they are connected, and they don't have any ecological value. So users can zoom in into particular neighborhoods, and here I'm zooming into an area near the Burbank soccer fields, for example. And they could see how each neighborhood fares relative to the rest of the watershed and how each property compares. We can overlay additional data that could help enrich our perspective. For example, here I'm overlaying the areas that have been recently approved for future development. So as you can see, we are still building in less than ideal locations. We can corroborate with existing tools developed by our city as well. This is the overlay of the city's storm water master plan, flood conveyance zones. These are areas that are supposed to be preserved for enhancing flood resilience. And so by putting all this data together in a platform that's accessible to the public, we could start moving towards better development decisions that are economically sound and safe. Because when it comes to water hazards, the question is change going to come to us, imposed by external factors like rising insurance premiums that are pushing people out of the state? Or is it going to be designed by us in alignment with shared values, protecting our properties and lives, preserving our cultural and natural heritage, and reducing our dependence on federal subsidies for risky development? Those are values I think most of us can get behind. And that brings me to a value that I want to share with my kids, and that is environmental stewardship. So one of the concepts that parents often turn to initiate kids in environmentalism is how to manage our waste. We teach them, we reuse, we reduce, and we recycle. But what about our cities? Abandoned buildings are a waste, but they're also an opportunity. So let us reuse and recycle our buildings and infrastructure. Let us reduce our indiscriminate use of habitat and natural land. Let us reignite life back into our urban centers. So with that in mind, let's imagine how the city of Baton Rouge could become a place where communities can live safe from water hazards, a place that attracts investment with roads and neighborhoods that are walkable, lively, and safe. A place where kids can play outside and go places on their own. As they do that, they can enjoy the smell of Holy Trinity vegetables spilling through from nearby doorways. Behind those doorways, multiple generations of the same family can still gather together to share a jambalaya every Sunday. Let's keep our families together in Louisiana. We have the tools, we have the knowledge, we have the will. Now we just need to choose to become the architects of Louisiana's climate transition story. Thank you.